All right, picking back up here, A pushers, with guided discussion number 9. Guided discussion number 9 is talking about Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society. So I know you've been waiting for this all year. I'm really excited to deliver it to you, and so let's get started here. All right. The first thing I want to talk about is, and again, I would remind everybody to please make sure that you follow along on the shared Google document that is the Unit 13 notes, so that way you can see where we're at as far as bullet points here. First point for guided discussion number 9 is Michael Harrington and the Other America. Michael Harrington was an author who wrote a book called The Other America, which was basically a book that described how nearly 20% of the nation lived in poverty, including the aged, minorities, and single-parent families. He discussed how the poor were cut off from educational and unemployment opportunities, as well as medical care. This led to a lot of people in America kind of questioning the role of the government and what they could do to help solve these problems. And so the Great Society was first brought up in Lyndon Johnson's State of the Union address in January of 1964. He announced that this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America. Whether or not it should be the government's job or responsibility to end poverty is a discussion that will forever be debated in this country, and one, at least I think, for a long time it will be debated, and I'm not sure what the answer is. President Lyndon Johnson was much more successful at getting legislation passed than John F. Kennedy had been. Part of the reason was because Johnson was much more of a deal maker than Kennedy was. He was a bulldog. He loved the political infighting that Kennedy hated. There are famous pictures of Johnson standing there with his face in he's a close talker. If you've ever seen that Seinfeld episode, if you don't know what Seinfeld is, ask your parents. He was a close talker. He'd kind of get in people's face. He'd make them feel uncomfortable, and that was something that he believed in. Now, Johnson himself said, "They say Jack Kennedy had style, but I'm the one that got the bills passed." Johnson was especially famous for convincing congressmen to vote for his legislation by giving them the Johnson treatment. A journalist described the Johnson treatment by saying, "He moves in close," I'm talking about, his face a scant millimeter from the target, his eyes widening and narrowing, his eyebrows raised and falling, rising and falling. From his pockets poured clippings, memos, statistics. He would mimic people, use humor, and the genius of analogy that basically turned people into these helpless targets that would essentially agree with him. All right. Johnson's Great Society was the name given to Johnson's programs. So the Great Society was the name given to his programs to end poverty and fight racial injustice. Between 1964 and 1966, some 435 bills were passed as part of the Great Society, the most significant period of reform legislation since the New Deal. The Office of Equal Opportunity. At the beginning of 1964, President Johnson created the Office of Economic Opportunity, the OEO, to fight the war on poverty. I'm sorry, did I say equal or economic? My bad. Three major things three major OEO programs were as follows. First one was Project Head Start, which provided education for preschoolers from disadvantaged families. Another program was the Job Corps that provided dropouts with vocational training. And the third one was VISTA, which is the Volunteers in Service to America, which was a domestic Peace Corps. President Kennedy created the Peace Corps. Johnson created VISTAs. Ripon College, I know, has a VISTA program, so they have people who are working as in VISTA to kind of help out in the community, and they're stationed right on the college campus. The election of 1964. The election of 1964 featured the Republican candidate Barry Goldwater against the Democratic candidate Lyndon Johnson. Concerning government and its relationship to the economy, Goldwater advocated a return to a laissez-faire approach to government. He wanted to end the welfare state created under FDR and suggested abolishing the income tax and making Social Security voluntary. Now, Goldwater even favored using nuclear weapons, if necessary, against North Vietnam and Cuba. Johnson beat Goldwater in a landslide victory. The Democrats actually increased their majorities in both houses of Congress. There's a famous commercial with Johnson and Goldwater, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, where there's this little girl who's standing there after a nuclear war, and it's kind of like hinting that Goldwater would blow things up. And I'm pretty sure it's the Goldwater-Johnson presidency. If I am wrong on that, which is very possible, maybe not, I don't know. But if I am, then I apologize. But I think that was the one I'm thinking of. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about the Great Society here. Both the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 are generally considered to be part of LBJ's Great Society. Another lasting part of LBJ's Great Society was the Medical Care Act, which set up Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is government-provided medical insurance and care for people over 65. Medicaid is government-provided health care for the poor. There was also the Omnibus Housing Act of 1965. That's OMNIBUS. OMNIBUS. Housing Act of 1965. This appropriated money for more low and middle income housing. It included rent supplements for low income families as well. Another major Great Society program was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It provided more than $1 billion in aid to public and parochial schools. And of course, when we start talking about government at the federal level funding schools, it of course leads us into that slippery slope of them being able to kind of control that funding and provide programs, attach agreements onto the funding that they give schools, even today, that you have to comply with certain rules and meet certain expectations to get that funding. So it's kind of a lot of fingers in the mix there from the federal level that tell us what we're supposed to do as a small local municipality or small local institution, as a public school. Another Great Society program that remains controversial today is the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities. National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities. This program provides federal money to help promote the arts and the humanities. Should we be spending money on that? In addition to all these programs, President Johnson signed another landmark piece of legislation. He signed the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. It eliminated essentially the discriminatory quotas set up in the 1960s and treated all nationalities and races equally. There were hemispheric ceilings, and the law provided for the admission of close relatives as U.S. citizens. After this, the most immigrants came from Asia and Latin America. Now, although the Great Society programs many Great Society programs remain in place, the Great Society, as President Johnson envisioned it, did not materialize. A major reason why his Great Society didn't turn out the way he necessarily thought it could be, or as good as it could be, was that the programs were severely underfunded, especially because the government ended up spending more money on the war in Vietnam. Okay, that's it. That's guided discussion number 9, right there in a nutshell. 11 minutes and 4 seconds.